A sociology class about health and disease probably doesn't sound like the obvious setting for an exhibition of experimental photography. But over the course of a term at Drexel, students started translating medical systems, chronic illness, disability, anxiety, care, and survival into images. Photographs that functioned almost like visual field notes, documenting not only symptoms or diagnoses, but the emotional texture around them. From Drexel University's Antoinette Westphal College of Media Arts and Design, this is Iterations, a podcast about creativity, design, and the ideas that emerge when disciplines collide. I'm Laurel Hostak-Jones. Today, we're talking about visualizing health, wellness, disease, and the systems and structures that surround them.
It started with the sociology department, and they were starting to rethink their core teaching methodologies around the time that ChatGPT started becoming wildly popular with students.
Sociology faculty Kelly Underman and Emmanuel Koku started reconsidering how students engage with course material in an increasingly image-driven culture. They were also interested in encouraging meaningful interaction with the sociological frameworks that couldn't be recreated or circumvented by ChatGPT.
One of the things that kept coming up was how to integrate some kind of visual literacy with these sociological concepts, especially in this day and age where everything is Instagrammable and a visual almost needs to be connected to any kind of text.
So they brought in Kylie Wright, a member of the photography faculty in the Antoinette Westphal College of Media Arts and Design. Her role was practical. Teach students the mechanics of photography, composition, light, design basics, how images guide attention.
Basically give the students a crash course in photography, basic design elements, things like that. How to decide just basic questions like, should this image be in color or in black and white? And the answer was usually, is the color doing anything? And if it's not, maybe black and white would be more appropriate.
Students came from all over the university: nursing, economics, biology, engineering, and many had never taken an art class before. But Kylie noticed that once students began thinking metaphorically, the work changed quickly.
The first week, we got a whole lot of pictures of pill vials. The second week, they had built little towers out of the pill jars and were like making a prison out of them. Or, something that translated into a new idea that they had, but they had to make that first idea literally to get to the second.
That progression became part of the class itself. Learning to think visually meant learning how to move beyond illustration and into interpretation. As the class developed, the photographs became a way into sociology itself. Students weren't simply documenting experiences with illness or healthcare. They were working through frameworks that asked where those experiences come from and who has the power to define them.
I don't know that I ever took a sociology class in college, and so it was a real learning curve for me because I was doing the reading along with the students. A lot of it was questioning things that we'd been told, like just even the hierarchy of medicine.
One concept students kept returning to was stigma, the way illness can become social as much as biological, the management of visibility, what gets hidden, what gets disclosed, and the careful choreography of appearing fine. Some students photographed medication routines. Others photographed isolation, exhaustion, anxiety, or the rituals they used to cope, The images tracked the daily negotiations people make around being legible to others. And underneath many of the projects was another sociological idea: the moral career of illness. The understanding that becoming a patient changes how a person moves through institutions, relationships, and identity itself. That diagnoses can reorganize someone's sense of self over time. You could see students trying to visualize that transformation in real time.
When we were writing the class syllabus, we realized that we couldn't just dwell on, sickness sucks. We needed to be a little more hopeful, and so that's why, the first week we would let them document the feeling of what it's like to live with eczema, but then also how I get over that, how I overcome that in my individual self. And so that became, I think, a lot more compelling to the students because it gave them answers. It wasn't just documenting, oh, I have this disability. It was how I live a happy, full life.
For many students in the course, these questions are inseparable from race and medical authority. Who gets listened to? Whose experience or pain are treated as credible? Sociology gives students language for structural experiences they may have already recognized from their own lives.
A lot of my students of color were saying that, oh, it's just nice to have an advocate of somebody who is not just talking down to me, telling me what to do, and to be provided with these sociological frameworks of I am allowed to ask questions. I'm allowed to have a different point of view.
Those conversations extended outward into structural racism in healthcare, the unequal distribution of care, environmental risk, and medical trust. These are rarely isolated incidents of prejudice, but structural inequities that accumulate over time. Kylie found herself thinking differently about the relationship between individual suffering and larger upstream forces, social and political determinants of health.
This idea of downstreaming, a lot of the problems that we encounter in our day-to-day lives come from much, much bigger things upstream that are causing us to be drowning in our lives.
That idea shaped how students approached photography, too. An image could begin with something intimate or autobiographical: an inhaler, a prescription bottle, a family member, while still pointing toward broader structures surrounding labor, race, gender, environment, or access to care.
I ended up curating the best of the images that we had collected, printed it, we had a show, the students were delighted, and it was really surprising at the opening because they had so much to say about their experience in learning how to create a visual narrative that was not dependent on words, and how hard it was for a lot of them, but also how ultimately fulfilling it was.
One of the most striking threads in the exhibition centered around the sociology of gender and illness, particularly the long history of women's emotions, bodies, and behaviors being medicalized. At one point in the course, students read Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper, the 1892 short story about a woman undergoing the rest cure, slowly descending into a psychological collapse while confined inside a room covered in disturbing wallpaper. The story has become foundational in feminist critiques of medicine and psychiatric authority. And while students were reading it in sociology, Kylie was independently introducing photographic work, exploring similar themes.
Dr. Koku had them read that, and one of the pictures that I didn't even realize he was having them read that when I put this in the slideshow, but Francesca Woodman, who was a photographer, who was a young woman that living in America in the 1970s, and a lot of her work was to do with not having a voice in the American patriarchal world and not being taken seriously. And she's got one picture where she's literally disappearing she's wrapped wallpaper across her naked body. So she's literally disappearing into the wallpaper. And when he saw that picture, he was like, oh my God, the synchronicity here is amazing.
Both works ask similar questions. What happens when women's distress gets reframed as pathology? How does medicine absorb social control into its definitions of care? And what does it mean to disappear inside systems that claim to be helping you?
It really is about the medicalization of femininity, or being a woman is inherently a sickness, which in the 19th century was a firm belief that made you weaker. We were the weaker sex. And so I thought that was really interesting, that where the actual pictures I was showing them in class were overlapping with some of the readings that they were already doing.
The overlap wasn't planned, but that's part of what the project revealed. How stories and symbols migrate between disciplines, between sociology and photography, between medicine and art, fiction and nonfiction, between research and lived experience. Here's another sociological concept the students encountered and interpreted: social contagion. The way emotions, behaviors, and beliefs spread collectively through groups. Students read about the Tanganyika laughter epidemic of 1962, where uncontrollable laughter spread through a girls' boarding school and eventually across surrounding communities. It was a phenomenon that resisted easy medical explanation.
People were dropping dead of laughter, and then it just abruptly stopped one day, which is so fascinating because, we're a strange bunch of folks.
The story lingered because it destabilizes familiar assumptions about illness, like that disease is experienced by an individual, that it's biological, that it's always located neatly inside a single body. But social contagion suggests something messier, that emotion, stress, trauma, fear, and behavior circulate socially too, that bodies are shaped collectively and in relationship to each other. And photography, with its ability to capture gesture, proximity, repetition, and atmosphere, became one way for students to think about those invisible forms of transmission. Photography has always had a complicated relationship to power. Who gets represented? Who gets archived? Who gets looked at? And who disappears?
The history of photography is such a democratizing thing. People were clutching their pearls in the 19th century about it because anybody and everybody could pick up a camera and take a picture. And it wasn't like painting where you had to spend a bunch of money and be in the upper tiers of society. And people were taking pictures of ridiculous things like their dogs, And so it's always had this history of sort of upending what we're supposed to think about things.
For Kylie, photography's accessibility is part of what makes it politically powerful, especially in conversations about illness and disability.
One of my favorite examples is a photographer named LaToya Ruby Frazier. She's a Pennsylvania photographer from Braddock. And she was using her family and her family members to explore the socioeconomic disparity, these small towns that no longer do manufacturing and things like that. And then taking that into the broader world, the last 4 years she's spent studying people in Flint. How do you make an image that explains the water is poisoning us without just having a literal sign saying the water is poisoning us? How do you express these very complex ideas in a visual form that is sort of universally understood. I think that even being seen in terms of a lot of medical things are like we sweep it under the carpet, we're not supposed to look at that. Sometimes just the act of being seen became important in terms of acceptance of disease or illness or disability.
By the end of the project, students had created an exhibition full of images about healthcare, caregiving, anxiety, chronic illness, race, gender, community, and survival. But the deeper subject of the work was interpretation itself. How people learn to understand their own experiences. How institutions shape those understandings. And how images can challenge, reinforce, or complicate the stories that societies tell about health.
Every photograph is a little revelation on its own. There was one picture of a grandmother holding a little baby doll, and it's so poignant and touching because it's so universal. The backstory was that the grandmother had dementia and liked to carry the baby around. But it was just such a human story. And I think that those moments where we capture humanity and where we can all relate to those things.
One thing Kylie heard over and over from students was how difficult it was to communicate visually without relying on explanation. That process forced students to clarify their own thinking. Not just what they believed, but what they were actually trying to say.
Photography is inherently flexible enough to embrace any and all of those things, which is what makes it still so relevant in our worlds, and even more so than ever, because image making is something that I think no matter what your major is in college, you're going to have to at some point use some imagery, and having some visual literacy, how to use a picture to tell a story, to advance your own narrative, is a skill that we all need.
One of my favorite photos in the exhibition is of a group of friends piled together in a heap on the floor. It's joyful, it's chaotic, it's connected. It's a picture of coping, surviving, thriving, whatever you want to call it. It's a picture of what health looks like to me. The exhibition asked students to practice another kind of literacy, looking closely at systems that often present themselves as natural or inevitable, and then learning how to picture them differently.
Having seen what we could do with sociology, I'm now curious as to what other departments that are out there, like maybe history or other things where we could actually have this very fruitful exchange of ideas, introducing this idea of talking visually about things. It's a real exciting place to be because we made something new. It's making me think about my own photo students right now, because my intro to photo class is actually a cross-pollination of around the whole university. I've had nursing students, I've had engineers. One of my best students right now is in biology. They're all over the place.
Something I resonate deeply with about the Visualizing Health project is the celebration of process. The idea that sometimes we have to make something literal in order to transcend to the next level, or that we have to be okay with making something mediocre, because that's how we advance our skills to make something good or great. That's a big part of why this podcast is called Iterations, because researching, making, iterating, and reiterating are essential to the creative process.
Especially when students are first starting to learn how to speak visually, it always starts with the most literal things. And where it becomes interesting is sometimes in their mistakes, they accidentally do something and then it is like, oh, that was cool. Let's replicate that.
As it turns out, iteration is a huge feature of Kylie's personal photography practice.
During COVID, it was a real struggle because we were on lockdown. How do you be a photographer when you can't go out in the world? I got obsessed with this pile of gravel that was in the IGA parking lot near my house. And they had started building a fast food place, and then it got put on hold because of COVID. So the pile of gravel stayed there for a good 6 to 8 months. Maybe twice a week, I would go and I would try to re-photograph that same gravel pile in black and white, in color, different times of day, and up close, far away. How can I make a new photo that's something new of the same thing? And it culminated in a book that I self-published called Gravel John. So Jawn, of course, because we're in Philly. The artistic process can be a little obsessive, but especially in something like photography or drawing or any of those, just going back and repeating the task is really integral to becoming a better artist.
Before we wrapped our conversation, I asked Kylie to give you your homework for this week.
As a photographer, I hate taking pictures of myself, but the self-portrait can be very revelatory. So asking yourself, how am I feeling? That's such an easy question. And maybe acting out to yourself with your own phone, a picture can be a way of not just journaling, but putting outward what might have been unconsciously inward. And I think a lot of photography is like us projecting. We all see a little bit differently, and even if we're taking a picture of the same thing, we all have a slightly different point of view. I think that just taking a picture of yourself can be a very revelatory moment.
This has been Iterations. I'm Laurel Hostak-Jones. Next time, on our Season 1 finale, we'll look at 2 artistic approaches to the health and survival of our one and only home, the Earth. Iterations is created and produced by me, Laurel Hostak-Jones, in partnership with Drexel's Antoinette Westphal College of Media Arts and Design. Our supervising producer is Brandon Johnson. Production support is generously provided by the Department of Cinema and Television.